They filled theaters. They were on every magazine cover in America. And when they died, some of them didn't even have enough money for a funeral. This is the side of fame that Hollywood never wanted you to see. 15 legends who gave everything to the screen and were left with nothing. Stay until the end, because the last story on this list will break your heart. Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi will forever be remembered as Dracula. In 1931, he was the most talked about actor in America. His accent, his presence, his eyes turned a Hungarian stage actor into a horror icon overnight. But the role that made him famous also trapped him. Studios typecast him almost exclusively as a gothic villain, and his thick accent limited the parts he could play. As the horror genre fell out of fashion, the offers dried up completely. By the 1950s, Lugosi was living in poverty, eventually reduced to appearing in extremely low-budget films just to pay his bills. He passed away in 1956 with very little to his name, the man who once commanded the screen as Count Dracula, forgotten by the very industry he helped define. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake was one of the most photographed women in the world. Her peekaboo hairstyle was so iconic that the US government once asked her to change it, worried that factory workers were copying her look and getting their hair caught in machinery. But fame faded fast. She struggled with alcohol in later years and passed away in poverty just before turning 51. The woman whose face once sold millions of movie tickets spent her final years working ordinary jobs just to get by, far from the cameras that once couldn't stop finding her. Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton was a genius. As a silent film director and stuntman, he built entire films around jaw-dropping physical comedy that still stuns audiences today. But the arrival of sound film changed everything, and the major studios stopped wanting him. He lost creative control, lost his contracts, and lost his fortune. For years, he lived modestly, his glory days seemingly behind him, before a wave of critical reappraisal late in his life finally gave him the recognition his work deserved. By then, the financial damage from his hardest years had already been done. He's proof that even genius isn't immune to Hollywood's short memory. Billie Holiday. Technically a singer first, but Billie Holiday's haunting screen presence in her few film roles left audiences just as mesmerized as her music did. Her voice carried generations, but addiction and an industry that exploited her took almost everything. When she was hospitalized near the end of her life, her bank account was frozen, and she died with only 70 cents to her name, with $750 in cash hidden in her stocking, money she was too afraid to put in a bank. Thousands came to her funeral. The woman who gave the world some of its most beautiful music left this world with almost nothing. Sammy Davis Jr. was a member of the legendary Rat Pack, starring alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin in some of the most beloved films of the era. He earned millions across his career, but despite his success, Davis was completely broke when he passed away from cancer in 1990, reportedly owing around $7 million in unpaid taxes. After his death, royalties from his music and film work were redirected straight to settle his debts. Even after he was gone, Hollywood was still collecting from him. Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was once one of Hollywood's most promising child stars, even earning a Special Academy Award and a star on the Walk of Fame. He was the voice and face of Peter Pan in Disney's classic film. But as he grew older, the roles vanished, and so did the support system around him. After serving time for drug-related charges, finding steady work became nearly impossible. He died in his early 30s with almost nothing left, and was buried in an unmarked grave. His identity wasn't even confirmed for nearly 2 years. Lupe Velez. Mexican actress, singer, and dancer who became one of the first major Latina stars of Hollywood's golden age, lighting up the screen in the Mexican Spitfire film series. She was magnetic, fiery, and beloved by audiences. But behind the bright persona, she faced deep personal struggles, financial pressure, and heartbreak that the public rarely saw. Her career, like so many on this list, faded just as quickly as it had risen, leaving behind a legacy far bigger than the bank account she had at the end. Joe Keaton. Before Buster Keaton was a household name, Joe Keaton built the family act that started it all in vaudeville. Joe became an alcoholic over the years, and the family act eventually fell apart. Even after his son found success in film, Buster supported him with small movie parts, and Joe spent his later years living alone in a modest Hollywood hotel room. A reminder that fame in one generation doesn't always protect the family that built the foundation. Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr starred opposite the biggest leading men in Hollywood, and off-screen, she co-invented technology that would later help shape wireless communication as we know it today. But the industry that once adored her stopped calling. Her comeback attempt fell apart after a public arrest, and for decades afterward, she lived largely out of the spotlight. One of the most brilliant women to ever grace the screen spent her final years almost invisible to the public that once couldn't look away. Gary Coleman. Gary Coleman's smile defined a generation of television, but he had to sue his own parents over mismanagement of his fortune, eventually winning over $1 million, only to declare bankruptcy a decade later. He reportedly had very little money left when he passed away in 2010 at just 42 years old. The child the whole country grew up watching grew into an adult the industry simply moved on. Mary Astor. Mary Astor won an Academy Award and worked steadily across 4 decades of Hollywood film, becoming one of the most respected actresses of her era. But behind the glamour, her personal life was constantly under public scrutiny, and a series of difficult relationships and legal battles drained both her finances and her spirit. In her later years, she stepped back from the spotlight almost entirely, choosing a quiet, modest life far removed from the fame that once surrounded her name on every marquee in the country. Jean Arthur. Jean Arthur was one of the brightest comedy stars of the 1930s, starring in beloved classics like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Audiences adored her warmth on screen, but off-camera, she struggled with severe anxiety, reportedly so intense that she would run to her dressing room in tears the moment filming stopped. Eventually, the pressure of fame became too much, and she walked away from Hollywood almost entirely, choosing a private life of near total seclusion over the career that had once made her a household name. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney appeared in roughly 300 films across his lifetime and earned millions of dollars throughout his career, but he filed for bankruptcy in 1962 after the mismanagement of his earnings, and the financial troubles never fully went away. When he passed away from natural causes at age 93 in 2014, he reportedly had only around $18,000 left, along with medical bills and back taxes. A career spanning nearly the entire history of Hollywood itself, and still it wasn't enough to secure his final years. Anita Ekberg. Anita Ekberg became a global icon the moment she waded into Rome's Trevi Fountain in La Dolce Vita, one of the most famous scenes in cinema history. She worked for decades afterward, sharing the screen with legends like Frank Sinatra and Audrey Hepburn. But by 2011, reports described her as destitute following a hospital stay, during which her home was robbed and damaged by fire, and she had to apply to a charitable foundation for financial help. When she passed away in 2015 after a long illness, her lawyer confirmed she had been struggling financially in her final years. The woman whose image defined an entire era of cinema spent her last years simply trying to get by. Joe Louis. Closing out this list is someone many people don't realize belongs on it. Joe Louis wasn't just one of the greatest boxers of all time, he also became a familiar face in film and television in his later years, embraced by Hollywood and the American public alike. But despite earning millions at his peak, poor investments and tax issues left him in debt by the time he passed away. A man once celebrated as a national hero, spending his final years dealing with financial battles most of his fans never knew about. 15 stars. 15 names the world once couldn't stop watching, and 15 reminders that the brightest spotlight doesn't always light the way to a safe ending. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real Hollywood history, the kind they don't put on the posters.